Welcome in to episode 12 of Flag for Discussion. My name is Farbod Merkazi. He's Jace Hatfield. This episode is for Monday, June 30th. Last day of June, episode 12. We got to really start breaking out into our previews of the college football season upcoming. We've done a lot of fun games, but we just talked about it before the show. We're entering July, which is the last month in the 2025 calendar without any college football games. So we really got to start breaking down. Today we start with our Big Ten. We have a seating chart planned for them. Show you how I see the Big Ten season, Big Ten teams all stacking up. We're going to do the SEC, the Big 12, maybe in the Pac-12, the ACC for sure. We'll start breaking down some of these big teams. Kenny Dillingham, Kirby Smart, Matt Rhule make our program report. We'll see where they stack up amongst the coaches with our rankings. And we got a bit of breaking news before the show today, Jace. College basketball college basketball is making its return as a video game as well. NCAA, EA, they're gonna release that. We'll get into that, and then we'll break down a big game, week 2, Michigan, Oklahoma. So if you like what you hear, if you like what you're seeing with Flag for Discussion, hit us up. Find us on Twitter, F4Discussion, on TikTok at F4Discussion, on YouTube we're Flagged for Discussion. Jace and I are also active on Twitter if you want to reach out. Our handles are all over our Flag for Discussion socials. And then more than anything, we've been appreciating everyone who have made comments, constructive criticisms, and given us any notes on our YouTube and our Apple Podcast, Spotify. So please continue to check those out, give those ratings, and let us know how you like them. We are growing, and it's been a lot of fun so far. Case, episode 12. What's going on?
Did you, I've got my Tigers cup for Tariq Skubal. Did you get a chance to watch that painting he was doing last night?
Dude, Tariq is unreal, and this is a completely different sport that we're talking about. But I was watching that game, and I was just like, man, there's not a lot of these out there, a lot of these guys out there, and you just got to enjoy it while you have them. By the way, if you haven't,
the man, Scott Harris, if you're listening, blank check to Skubal.
Exactly. If you haven't, I know this is we're not paid to do this, and we're not promoting anyone else's podcast. But if you haven't watched him with Big Cat and PFT Commenter on Part of My Take, that was a really good interview, and I would definitely recommend, especially for any Tigers fans out there, to go check that out. On that note, let's switch it to college football. Wow, you would think I didn't have that on my bingo chart of making my mistakes on this show. Anyways, switching gears to college football. Like I said, we're entering the last month of the 2025 calendar without any college football games happening. It's time to break down. We'll start out with the Big Ten, and I kind of want to do it in a fun way, and we'll have a graphic up on social so you can check it out, visually see it. I might be able to throw it onto the recording and the edit itself. Jace, this is my Big Ten seating chart. Obviously, if you've ever been to a concert, a wedding, sporting event, the best seats are up front, and then you go down to overflow, to standing room, general admission, stuff like that. Starting out, I also have to point out that the Big Ten seating chart, my Big Ten seating chart, isn't a reflection of program rankings. This isn't where I would stack up programs, because that's a completely different ranking. This is how I would stack up these individual teams for the 2025 season. Starting out with our didn't RSVP section, Northwestern and Purdue. I'm sorry, those two teams, a lot of fun behind. Barry Odom's going to hopefully bring Purdue back. Northwestern's got some hope with David Braum, but they're still not anywhere ready to compete in 2025. They're in my didn't RSVP section. The next section up, standing room only. starting out UCLA, Michigan State, Rutgers. Look, these three teams, you could argue they should all be higher. But I think we'll see as we go through the rest of the seating chart why they are down here. You're low on UCLA as it is. You're low on their hope. It's funny because LA is one of the biggest recruiting hotbeds in the country, but it almost feels like it's spread too thin for UCLA to succeed. Now, Deshaun Foster's done some great things recruiting wise this past cycle, trying to bring in bodies, trying to bring in better talent. So, do I expect them to become more competitive in the future? Absolutely. Right now, they're in standing room only. They're going to be in the bottom of the Big Ten. Michigan State, we talked about them last episode. I have all the respect in the world for Jonathan Smith. I know what he's going to build, but he's a slow build. He's a slow burn guy. He's not he's not going to microwave that team. So I don't think they're going to be ready to compete for a Big Ten title. And then Rutgers, realistically, Greg Schiano, all the respect in the world, but you know what you're going to get out of them every year. They're going to be tough to beat. They're going to be a hard-nosed, gritty football team. Probably going to hover around 500, maybe lower, maybe higher. It just depends on which way the ball bounces in some big games for them. Obstructed view. I think Maryland and Wisconsin are in this category for me. They're higher up than UCLA, Michigan State, and Rutgers right now for me. Wisconsin a couple years ago. They're sitting at least. Wisconsin a couple years ago made the big move to hire Luke Fickell. They didn't need to fire Paul Chryst. Paul Chryst was a good football coach, a great Big Ten coach, and he did some great things at Wisconsin. You would assume in the traditional Big Ten he would never have been fired. But when the TV deals came down, all the big money was added to the conferences. There was almost an unwritten agreement between the programs, like, all right, good isn't good enough anymore. So they took the big jump. They hired Luke Fickell. Has it really worked out? I guess you can't really knock the guy for his quarterback going down last year in week 1, but at the same time, Wisconsin is almost in a bit of an identity crisis right now, I think, because they were that tough-nosed physical football team that just had a little bit of extra pizzazz and flair, setting running backs, offensive linemen to the NFL with regularity. But it almost feels like at this point they're trying to figure out who they are. I don't see them competing much. Maryland, this is almost a make or break year. It's so funny with Maryland. They have great talent. They have good pieces, but it almost always feels like, oh yeah, they're building. Yeah, just give them a year. They have this piece here. Wait till they add a couple more, a receiver here. Wait till they really get the defensive line right. And it feels like instead of building to that point, they're instead every year just replenishing with another great player that they have, but then everything else is a bunch of holes. I don't see them doing much. They have an obstructed view in my seating chart. General admission. This might gather some hate, but I also see each of these teams as potential risers within the seating. USC, Minnesota, Nebraska, and Washington are my general admission row. USC and Washington, I don't think there's much to be said there. Washington, we're going to see what we get from Damon Williams. He's gotten a lot of hype. He just won the air it out competition, the Manning Passing Academy. Extremely talented quarterback. Jed Fish last year mentioned one of the reasons they're losing is just because they don't have enough big bodies. So we have to see it before I put them any higher. USC, they have talent. It just depends on, are they going to go with Jay Mayava or the 5-star kid Husan that they just signed at quarterback? And part of that, to be honest with you, is I expect USC to be as much higher than this in a couple of years. But that's hopeful too. We just have to see if they're ready to be there. And I mean, if I were to tell you right now, and I was a time traveler and it was December, I was like, Bro, USC lost in the Big Ten title game. I don't think either of us would have been shocked. Maybe a little surprise would be there, but at the same time, it's like, oh, they kind of put it together. The defense improvement that we saw flashes of last year, the offensive improvement we saw flashes of last year, came together and they became a truly well-rounded team. I'm not a believer that that'll happen for this 2025 USC team. Future, sure. 2025, no. Minnesota and Nebraska, completely different reasons. Minnesota will probably always be in general admission. They're just that team that's like steady Eddie. Like, they're going to be great. They're going to be bad. They're going to beat you at. They're going to get some balls to roll their way and get some good wins on their chart, but we don't know. Nebraska, is this the year that Matt Rhule and his history indicates that it will be the year that Matt Rhule's team kind of takes another jump? So this past year, Nebraska finally made a bowl game for the first time in 8 years under any other coaches, Scott Frost, Matt Rhule, and prior to that. But so he's already done big things, and we'll talk about Matt Rhule a lot more later in the show. But at Temple, at Baylor, year 2, year 3 was really that jump. Obviously, so is Nebraska there? Maybe. For now, they're in general admission. Maybe they'll get the nicer seats next year. My overflow table. This might draw some concerns or ire. Michigan is in my overflow table. Indiana and Iowa. I think it's pretty self-explanatory for Indiana and Iowa. There's a lot of question marks with those two teams. Iowa, for completely different reasons. Iowa, all right, the offense looked pretty good last year. Like for Iowa's standards. Tim Lester, the OC, came in and really fixed some of the crap that Brian Ferentz left behind when he got fired. We're not going to have will Iowa have more offensive yardage or punting yardage conversation this coming year? They just brought in a quarterback, South Dakota State's quarterback, Mark Gronowski. He's supposed to be pretty great. To me, it just really depends on how high does that offense allow them to take it, because we know the defense will put them in position to win games. Gronowski and Tim Lester just get first downs, which is something that they had struggled to do for a while. But they're in the overflow right now because I don't see them competing with the grand scheme with the top dogs of the Big Ten. Indiana, look, last year you could think it was a fluke or you could think it was a sign of things to come. They brought in Fernando Mendoza, who should be raising his NFL stock, who should be raising his stock as a quarterback, but it really depends on how Indiana looks this year and if Kurt Signandi is truly the real deal. And then Michigan. This might be a hot take that I threw them in my overflow table. I just see them below the rest of the teams that I have that we'll get to. But Michigan, I just saw. I still don't know what they are at quarterback. Are they going to go with a true freshman or go with a middle of the road quarterback? They have talent. I'm not saying they don't, but at the same time, are they also going to have the NFL defensive linemen and safeties that they had the last couple of years? No, those guys have graduated and moved on. So we're starting to enter what Sharon Moore sees as his Michigan team. I don't think they're ready to compete for a Big Ten title this year. So that's why they're in my overflow table. Illinois. Take a sip. Illinois is my featured guest. The next ring up. They are all alone in that category by themselves. And the main reason why is Illinois is as good of a team as they've had there in a long time. They're bringing back a lot of they're a senior-laden team. They should compete for a Big Ten title. My only doubts for them, and we've talked about this in the past, is there's a ceiling on that team. I don't think they're special on that team. I think they're fundamentally sound. So while they're going to beat the teams that they should, the way to get higher up on this seating chart and the way to get rings in the Big Ten is, can you win games you can't? And win games you shouldn't. They'll win the games they should. Can they beat the Oregons, the Ohio States? Can they beat the Penn States? Can they even beat Michigan? That's what will define their season this year. Then we got the inner circle, the next ring up. We got 2 more rings. Inner circle is the next one. Ohio State, Oregon. I mean, they're the class of the Big Ten right now. And you could argue that it's Michigan. Michigan deserves a seat on that table. Oh, I'm sure. They won a national championship 2 years ago. The program does. I'm talking about this team. So for the 2025 team, Oregon and Ohio State are the class of the Big Ten. They should be expected to be front runners to win the Big Ten. They are both replacing a lot from last year's team, but they both have extreme high levels of talent coming back and coming into the program. Ohio State's a little different where they replace both coordinators, but Ryan Day is still the head man there. The talent's still there, and we expect Julian Sand to be their quarterback, and that's going to be really exciting. Oregon, new quarterback, a lot of new defensive line pieces, but all talent. So that just leaves one more team and one more category in my seating chart. The solo spotlight on my list is Penn State. And you might disagree strongly, and that's fine. I see Penn State as this is James Franklin's ceiling definer. Can he go out and beat Oregon week 5? Can he go out and beat Ohio State? Can he go out and not only compete for a Big Ten title, win the Big Ten title, earn a first round bye, compete in the college football playoff? This season is super important, in my opinion, for the next 5 to 10 years of Penn State football. They need to be as successful as they can be. They are top to bottom on paper a top 2 or 3 team in the country, and they might not even be 2 or 3. They might be number 1. So it's more the reason they are solo spotlight. The reason I put them above Oregon and Ohio State isn't that I think their teams are vastly different. I think it's just the pressure and the momentum and the urgency to win now is much higher for Penn State than even Oregon, than Ohio State, Illinois. They need to win this conference. So that's my Big Ten seating chart. Penn State at the top, inner circle with Ohio State and Oregon. Illinois, the featured guest. Michigan, Indiana, Iowa are at the overflow table. And then everyone else, general admission and below. That was 15 minutes about that. Jace, I have to get your initial reaction in general.
All right, I'll start at the top. I like Penn State in the solo spotlight. I'm with you. I think day one right now they have the best roster in the Big Ten for sure, arguably college football. And like you said, I think like Ohio State and Oregon have a little bit younger teams, a couple new faces, so you're a little more unsure about them. Sure, all 3 of those teams have national championship ceilings, but I think as of right now they have the best floor, knock on wood, roster wise. So I like the solo spotlight. I agree with your inner circle. I think Ohio State and Oregon are kind of the next 2 teams, and like FanDuel betting odds to win the Big Ten will reflect all of that. I love the Illinois off to the side because I think they are in a unique spot this year. They return almost everybody minus Pat Bryant on offense. You have Luke Altmaier back. Your running back room is back. Your wide receivers that are playing for you this year, they weren't your wide receiver 1, but it was your 2, your 3, your 4, your 5 that are all back. Tight end's back. Your offensive line's back. Defensively, I think they turned over the entire D line, mostly just because they had a couple draft picks there. But even that, it was like, I believe the nose tackle and D end were both from Wisconsin. So it's not like you're patching together. They played together last year. So I think they're like in a good spot where really high floor, but I do think pretty low ceiling. Like you said, they're fundamentally sound. They should beat everybody in those groups below them. They're going to have to play a damn near perfect game to beat the 3 teams above them. And I think that's true. The overflow table is an interesting one. I almost would have Indiana up into featured guest just because of how good they were last year. And I am a Fernando Mendoza believer. His stats aren't going to jump out at you, but he did the most you could ask a QB at Cal to do, given how bad they had been these last few years. The fact that he's like got a 2-to-1 touchdown turnover ratio, like I said, at Cal is pretty impressive. The first change I would make is in the obstructed view, you have Maryland. I'll skip over general admission for now. I'm going to jump down to obstructed view with Maryland. I would knock them down into standing room only with that group of
Okay,
teams. Just coming off of a 4-8
that's
year
fair.
last year. Loxley's been there, I believe, since 2019. So, going into year 6, they still haven't done anything of like note or to be impressive. And this year they're either starting a transfer UCLA quarterback who's played like 10 snaps, or they're starting true freshman Malik Washington with an entirely new transfer-ridden wide receiver room and basically an entirely patched together transfer defense. After a 4-8 season like that, I don't have a lot of faith that they're going to be much more than 4-8 again. So I would drop them down. But I also, the general admission, I thought you kind of nailed that one. So I definitely wouldn't move any of those teams up or down. Washington, USC, Nebraska, good coaches, high ceilings, low floors. Hard to tell. Any of those teams could go 4-8, or they could go 10-2, and you're like, okay, yeah, that checks. Minnesota's they're in the right category, but they're the total flip. Like, I think they're either 6-6 or 8-4, and like, there's not a lot of variation in what they're going to be. I don't think with Minnesota, they're going to beat teams below them. PJ Fleck's a good coach; they can run the ball. They also do have a lot of turnover on offense this year, but they'll maintain their same defense, and that was a really good defense. And they probably have the most underrated player in the Big Ten in Coy Perch, maybe even the country, as a safety. He's emerging as one of the best safeties, and he'll be going to year 2. So the fact that he was doing that freshman year, I like where they're at. But overall, it's a good one. Sorry, Purdue. Sorry, Northwestern. I have a couple friends who went to those schools. You guys are amazing people. You're diehard fans. You deserve better.
Probably very
But
smart too, by the
unfortunately,
way.
yes, all very intelligent people, for the most part. Scout, I'm just kidding. Northwestern, the best thing they have going for them is the on the
New
lakes
stadium.
temporary stadium they've got going on until the new stadium is finished. Unfortunately, I don't blame them for not RSVPing to the 2025 season. Maybe we'll see you guys in 2026.
So I'm looking at my list again right now, and I like I said at the beginning of the segment, this isn't a program ranking breakdown. So, but it's a 2025 season breakdown. So I'm looking at this right now. I wouldn't necessarily move Maryland down. I would maybe bump UCLA up, just because program wise we might not think high on them. But they at least have competency at quarterback this year. They brought in Nico to be their quarterback. So you could argue that they'll have an obstructed view, but they'll have a puncher's chance of competing. But at the same time, I don't see that. Like if you look at my seating chart right now, Northwestern, Purdue didn't RSVP, probably going to average 2 to 4 wins, right? Then UCLA, and then standing room only, probably going to average 4 to 6. Then I would say probably obstructed view 5 to 8. General admission, I think the 4 teams there, one team could go 10-2, another team could go 2-10, but I think the average will be like an 8-4 with those 4 teams. And then overflow table, that one to me has such high variance of where it could end up. If Michigan figured out their quarterback, they're suddenly in the inner circle. But if their quarterback situation is crappy again, they don't have the NFL pieces that they had last year to save them and got them to 7-6. Could they go?
Yeah.
Could they go under 500? Could they be fighting for another fighting for another mid-level season? Especially with all the distractions that are going to be on them coming into this year with the whole NCAA Connor Stallion stuff that's still going on. By the way, that's ridiculous that the NCAA still.
Yeah, it's so dumb. And now they just filed the Matt Weiss lawsuit too. Just figure it out. Like, why are you dragging this thing on?
I don't understand it. So then Indiana and Iowa, I think those 2 teams. Iowa, we almost always expect to be good, but will they ever be special? They could be anywhere from 8-4 to 10-2 to, if their offense has figured it out, their defense is as good as normal. Maybe 11-1. Who knows? But that overflow table is just my variance table, because then I think once you get to Illinois, Ohio State, Oregon, you know what you're expecting. Illinois, anywhere from a 9 to 10 win season. Ohio State, Oregon, probably anywhere from a 10 to 12. Penn State, I think they need to win it or go 11-1. And I mean, I'm looking at the Illinois football schedule right now. They are missing Oregon, Michigan on the schedule. They got Duke, Indiana, USC, Ohio State, Washington that are like of notable teams on that schedule. It is a tough schedule for sure, but at the same time, not tough, but it is a challenging schedule. But at the same time, should they go 10-2? Probably. I mean, I think they should be able to compete for the biggest prize in the conference. It's just like you and I have said. I don't think they have. I think they have a really high floor. I don't think they have a high ceiling. So will they do? Will they be able to beat the best teams? I don't know, but will they be able to beat just the teams that they should be? I think that's around their phase right now.
Yeah, I think the gap between their floor and their ceiling is the narrowest of any team in the Big Ten.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean,
a couple teams get close to that, but
you could argue Penn State's gap between their floor and ceiling is just as narrow, but they're both of them is just that much higher than Illinois.
Yeah.
But then, like, you're looking at even Oregon, Ohio State. Their floor is not bad, but their floor is not good, right?
Yeah.
Like, if the quarterback situations don't pan out, if the replacements that they've gotten in the portal and the freshman development that they've counted on, they're banking on, don't pan out, all of a sudden they could be both in for down years. But for now, they're in the inner circle because I think that they should be there, right up there to win the Big Ten.
Yeah,
again.
and to be clear, a down year for schools right now, like Ohio State and Oregon, that's like 9-3. You know, like that's why they're in that inner circle. Like they're just
not
at the
competing
point
for
now
your
where,
goals.
Yeah. A down year is still a lot of these teams' dream years. It's just like you said, their goals are national championship. So 9-3 is not going to get you there.
Right. So that's my seating chart. I have to once again point out, like, Penn State is not just the best team in the conference for me. I don't necessarily expect them to win the conference, but they better, in my opinion. Like, this is, if they go out and have a dud of a year, man, that's just going to say a lot about James Franklin and that coaching staff, especially after they went out and got their new DC from Ohio State. They start out with Nevada, Florida International, Villanova. Should be 3-0. They have a bye. Then they get Oregon for their whiteout game at home, which is going to be one hell of a game. Probably the hardest game on Oregon's schedule as well. So that's a maybe. Then they got UCLA, Northwestern, Iowa. So they should go 3-0 in those games. Ohio State's there maybe on the road. Even if you want to chalk that up as a loss,
That's a loss.
I'll grant you that.
That's a loss.
Yeah, because it's on the road. So then they got Indiana at home, Michigan State on the road, Nebraska, Rutgers. So I see a very clear path to 11-1. Worst case, 10-2 for Penn State.
Yeah, anything worse than 10-2, it was a genuine letdown of a season.
Right. And in general, the odds to win the Big Ten per FanDuel right now, Ohio State has the best odds. Then it's Penn State, Oregon, Michigan, USC, Illinois, Nebraska, Iowa, and Indiana to round out the top 10 odds.
I want to dive into those odds a little bit because it's kind of an entertaining conference odds wise. So Ohio State at plus 190, Penn State at plus 260, Oregon at plus 300. That's like the tier one based on odds. All of those, not a lot of value betting wise, and I really do think between the three of them, like it feels like a coin flip. Obviously, like, you know, you can lean Ohio State, you can lean Penn State. I'm sure there's probably a lot of people who don't want to lean Oregon, just Midwest or the West Coast one there. But I do think it feels like a coin flip between the three of them in terms like any of them could emerge over the other. And in any one game, 4-quarter setting, like one of those teams could beat the other two. And I don't think there's enough value on any three of those for me to feel comfortable taking one. So I personally won't touch. If I'm putting a Big Ten bet down later, it won't be one of those three unless the odds significantly change. But then it drops immediately to plus 1,000 for Michigan, who's fourth. And then it goes all the way to plus 1,900 for USC, and then to plus 3,500 for Illinois. And then they kind of stack up there with Nebraska, Iowa, and Indiana. I don't know if you see it this way I do. I'm curious what you think. I don't see any value in that top three. There's a couple teams in that next batch that I don't hate. Like if you were someone who's looking to make a profit more so, like sprinkling on a couple of those other teams that you think might emerge out of that second tier group. But I'm not touching that tier one betting wise.
If I look, I'm looking at Illinois' schedule right now. And by the way, I didn't look at the odds when I was making my seating chart. And you could argue you should because odds makers know what they're talking about, or you shouldn't because you should just do it based off your team. When I first looked at the odds, I was like, oh, we're kind of lining up with like there's a inner like you could have just one top category called the inner circle and put Penn State, Ohio State, and Oregon all there. That's what the odds makers are telling us. But what's shocking to me is Illinois is plus 3,500. This is their their schedule is Western Illinois to start, Duke on the road, Western Michigan at home, Indiana on the road, USC at home. So that's realistically, if they are who we think they should be, that's 4-1, 5-0, right? Maybe the losses to USC, maybe the losses to Indiana. That could also be 3-2.
Let's say
2-3.
Let's go 4. Yeah, I think they have to win one of those. Like, not saying they're going to, but they need to win one of those two for sure.
If they want to win the Big Ten, absolutely. So then they got Purdue on the road, Ohio State at home. They get them at home at least. Washington on the road. That's going to be tough going out to Washington at the end of October. And Rutgers, Maryland, Wisconsin, and Northwestern to round it out. So I think they'll finish with 4 wins. If they start out 4-1, 5-1 with Purdue, then Ohio State, Washington are the difference between them potentially earning a shot for the Big Ten title game or being just out. And that is at plus 3,500 odds. If you got $10 or $100 to put down for that, that's not bad value for me.
I agree.
Iowa, I'm not just going to be fishing for value in general because do I expect?
I think
that
Iowa's throwing
your
money away. If I'm being honest,
Iowa has Albany, Iowa State, UMass, Rutgers, Indiana, Wisconsin, Penn State. Yeah, they have Penn State, Minnesota, Oregon. They got Penn State, Oregon, USC. So they miss Ohio State, they miss Michigan, but they still got Oregon and Penn State on their schedule. 2 teams we expect to be above them. So Iowa's probably throwing away your money. Indiana's not bad either.
No, I'm looking at this schedule. Indiana's going to have the schedule to do it because they're going to play a lot of teams. They're probably going to be like neck and neck with to fight out one of the top 2 spots. They get Illinois at home, which is a big one to have at home. But then you immediately follow that by going at Iowa, so playing at Kinnick. Probably going to have to win both of those based on the rest of the schedule because they do play at Oregon and at Penn State.
And those are going to be tough.
Yeah, they could upset one of them for sure, but those could be 2 losses. At Maryland, they should win. Wisconsin at home, they should win. At Purdue's not a bad way to end your season. You get UCLA, Michigan State at home. They have a very they don't have a lot of like in between games. They have a lot of like you should definitely win these games, and then they have a couple like really uphill battle kind of fighting those out games. So if you're like Indiana's not a bad sprinkle. If they can pull off like one of the 2 Oregon Penn State upsets, you're looking at a team that'll most likely find, barring any bad, and you don't think they're going to lose like a throwaway UCLA at home kind of game. This is a team that you could find yourselves like playing in that Big Ten championship. And I feel like when you're taking these odds, especially like the longer shot, I'm not even necessarily going with, do I really think they're the best team? I'm more so like, what's their path to get? Because they just got to get to the Big Ten championship. Path? Yeah, and then once they're there, you can pray for a crazy 4 quarters. Anything can happen. It's more so like, can they get there? So I feel like with these long shots, you want to find teams that have a realistic path. And then those are the teams you can put a little money. So I think, like you just called out, Illinois is a good one. I like Indiana here. I'd have to look at Michigan's schedule. Plus 1,000 isn't quite as attractive as like the plus 3,800 and plus 4,500s you're getting with some of these teams, but like
I
Indiana's
have
plus 4,800.
Michigan's schedule is quite a little bit tough, I think. So they got New Mexico to start at home, Oklahoma on the road. Sherman Moore is going to go play his alma mater, and then
That'll be
Central
fun.
Michigan, Nebraska, Wisconsin, USC, Washington, Michigan State, Purdue, Northwestern, Maryland, Ohio State. There's 2 roadblocks in there for me, clearly, of Oklahoma and Ohio State. If Washington takes the next step, they're going to be a roadblock. USC, they have to go all the way out to LA. They might be a roadblock. Nebraska is a really tough place to play, especially just in the middle of September when their fan base has the most hope they might all year. So like they top end talent, they play 2 big teams, but the rest of it should be doable. Like you said, I don't see the value necessarily in the Michigan at plus 1,000, especially because I don't know the quarter. Like I can't put money down on a quarterback situation. I have no idea.
Yeah,
Who's going to come out on top? Who's going to like it? I mean, you know what I mean. Like it's a little freaky to me to place money on a team that, as excited as you could be in their quarterback situation with the 5-star kid they just they brought in, or Mikey Keene, but they also just last week brought in a transfer quarterback, and I feel like it's a little late, and this seems like an emergency safety valve in general of like,
it's not a
all
good
right,
sign.
worst case, if neither of these guys pan out, at least we have someone who will toe the line, may not lead us anywhere, but at least not give us an extremely low floor.
Yeah. They have the opposite of the Indiana schedule this year. And so obviously the Oklahoma game will be big, but not a Big Ten game. So hypothetically it doesn't change anything with their Big Ten standings. They only play Ohio State. That's their only like big dog top end game they have to play in the Big Ten, which I think they're one of the only teams that only have to play one of the big 3. So that's a great sign for them to starting off that way. And that's a home game. And I feel like if you're going to play a team hypothetically better than you, it's best to be the team that's your rival that you've beaten the last 3 years in a row. And then outside, they don't play Oregon, they don't play Penn State, they don't play Indiana, so you miss out all of those, and they don't play Illinois, so you don't play them either. You also don't play Iowa. So if you looked at like Farbod, your seating chart, they only play one of the left side, which if you're listening, go check out the Twitter, you'll see it up there. You're only really playing one of the premier kind of top 10 teams we had listed. Right. But they do get the next bulk, like at Nebraska, like you said, that'll be tough. At USC, going to LA, that'll be tough. I don't think you ever want to take Wisconsin for granted. It is homecoming at home, but still. And then Washington is a home game, but another team that could be kind of frisky. And then at Michigan State, normally a game that I think most teams would label as a win, but at one of your rivals, I think is also never want to take those games for granted. You're probably going to get their best shot. So not a super easy schedule. It's not hard. It's definitely one of the easiest schedules in the Big Ten this year. But it's easy to overlook this schedule if you're Michigan, and you don't want to do that, especially when your quarterback situation is a little on the fritz. But I do think it's a favorable schedule overall.
Probably. If I'm looking at, I'm trying to find that document I built for the strength of schedule rankings for this coming season. But look, going back to the seating chart, I think, like you said, everyone on the top left or in the left side of it, realistically, if you like think of like the Oscars, there's a room filled with celebrities, but like the first couple rows are the ones that are nominated or the ones that have a chance to win an Oscar, right? They're the ones that have the best camera angle on them, best shots. They've done the most makeup. They're ready for speeches. They're ready. They're drinking. They're having fun. They're lubricated. Everything. I think you could tell me any of Michigan, Indiana, Iowa, Illinois, Ohio State, Oregon, or Penn State competed for the Big Ten title.
Yes, I would agree with that.
What the paths are to get there, like, but that also means like it goes back to what we talked about earlier, and there's been a 40-minute breakdown, but at the same time, like, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Michigan has a massive variance in what they could be, I think. I think they could be anywhere from Big Ten title contenders to 500. I don't know how much worse they can get than that, but that's where I see them. Indiana was last year a fluke. I don't see them tanking necessarily, but at the same time, if Fernando Mendoza is even a step up, if the team takes another next step under Kurt, could they compete for a Big Ten title? Absolutely. Also, going back to what we were talking about Indiana and the odds, do you remember what we talked about last week on episode 11? We did Clark Brooks's top 100 returning players. You know who was tied with the most returning players on that list? Indiana. They had 5 players in that top 100 returning. So not only do they have a path to do it, but they just have to take advantage of those important games of the teams they quote unquote shouldn't beat. But they also have the players to do it. Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, they should be the ones that are in the final 3 and then final 2 once December rolls around. We have the Big Ten title game. Oregon has a pretty soft schedule too. They miss Ohio State, but they have a couple of tougher games on the road this year, which worries you a little bit if you're an Oregon fan. But I think Oregon, even if Dante Moore and the young defensive linemen pan out the way most are expecting, 10-2 worst case, 11-1 best case, 12-0 best case. So at that point, they should be in there. Ohio State, I mean, like we were talking about odds and the meat and potatoes. If we're just being honest, Ohio State, they got Texas to start out, but that's not an SEC. That's not a Big Ten team. Then they got Grambling in Ohio. That's not a Big Ten team. But Big Ten play, they go to Washington. They're home against Minnesota. Go to Illinois. Go to Wisconsin. Home against Penn State. On the road against Purdue, UCLA, Rutgers, and Michigan to round it out. Not the easiest schedule of the world, but none of them are game breakers. None of them are. Ohio State's not going to be favored in that. Ohio State's going to be favored in all of them. They have an easy path. Not easy path, but they have a path there, and they're a likely path there.
Yeah.
If I were to ask you who wins the Big Ten today, June 30th, who you got? This can change. This isn't legal. This isn't like.
I think the Big Ten championship. I think the Big Ten championship is going to be Oregon versus Penn State again. I think it's a rematch. I think Penn State beats Oregon in the regular season this year. I think it's a rematch of the Big Ten championship last year, and I think like last year, I think the Ducks take down the Nittany Lions in the Big Ten championship.
I'm similar to you, except I don't have Penn State in it. I think Penn State is going to define their ceiling this year, which is why I put them in the solo spotlight. I think it's going to be the inner circle squaring off because the Big Ten, of all the smart decisions they've made in the last 3 years, the dumbest decision they might have made in the last year is not developing a rivalry between Oregon and Ohio State. They don't have those two teams playing this year. Guess when they're going to play? I have them in the Big Ten title game, and I'll have the Ducks getting being vindicated and getting revenge on the Rose Bowl loss.
I like that. I like how we both picked the Ducks. For those viewers, if people are like, oh, of course they would do that. The logic here is them and Michigan have, in my opinion, the 2 easiest schedules in the Big Ten this year. At least like of the teams competing at the top. They don't play each other, like those 2 teams. And then, like you said, Oregon does not play Ohio State. Their really only like true big test was going to be at Penn State, which is like affordable loss because they should still be able to run the table after that. So I think the favorable schedule gets them a spot at the table in that big game. And when I line it up with Penn State, I don't see James Franklin and Penn State beating Oregon twice in a season. I just don't also see James Franklin. You all hear I talk about him. I just don't see him clutching up and like winning a Big Ten championship. Ohio State, I just think there's going to be a little bit of that like hangover for Ryan Day. I think after almost being fired last year, finally winning, the national championship. And I think there's going to be a little bit of a hangover season. They do have a lot of roster turnover they have to iron out now. I also think like that their schedule lines up where going into that Michigan game, they're going to play like 4 or 5 nobodies in a row. And they're going to have an opportunity to like really just focus on that game. for the betterment of them in that game, it probably means they have a better shot of winning because they're going to spend 5 weeks focused on it. But I think for the detriment of what it means after, I think like the desire to win a national championship and all that is maybe a little bit lower after you finally did it. So I think like I could see a world where they just hyper focus on that game, they win it, all exciting, and then to turn around next week have to play a team that's a little bit more hungry than they might be. So that's just the logic there. That's kind of the reasoning.
Yeah, look, are we homers right now for picking Oregon? Sure, but it's June 30th, man. We don't know. Like, we're still
fun,
waiting. Yeah, we're having some fun. Maybe August 30th, you and I have each different picks once we have even more info on how the teams stack up, how everything stacks up. But I mean, like you said, the only thing we haven't considered when we're talking about Oregon, this is the last thing that I think we should talk about here, is Penn State is the hardest game they have to play, bar none. They go on the road. It's going to be the Penn State whiteout. And if they're not suited up, if they're not off the bus ready to compete physically, compete with the demands of the crowd, they could lose. But then, I mean, they got Iowa, Minnesota, they got Indiana on the schedule. I'm not too concerned for those games. I think Oregon will be favored in each of those, and they'll win each of those. One thing that we haven't talked about is where Washington's jump could be, especially at the end of the year. Oregon hasn't beaten Washington in Washington since 2021 with Mario Cristobal. They've never beaten Washington at Washington under Dan Lanning.
Yeah. In Dan Lanning's defense, he's only had to play there once, but
right. But that's still 4 years. I'm not taking anything away from Dan, but it's theoretically, if you're buying the hype of Washington, if you're buying the fact that they're getting better, they're recruiting better, Damon Williams is special. What's the everlasting take that we always say is, I don't want my week 1 team to play my week 15 team, my week 12 team, because my week 12 team should be, if we're coaching the right way, just so much better, so much more seasoned, so much more technically sound, so much more disciplined, that we don't want to play our week 1 team. Oregon's going to play them last week of the season on the road. That, if Washington's hype is real, if Damon Williams' hype is real, that could be a roadblock for Oregon.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
where the 10-2 or 9-3 might happen. The rest of it, I think, should be rather doable. All right, we both have Oregon as the Big Ten champs. I still think Ohio State, Penn State have a good shot. Like you said, the odds are really interesting. Sure. There's not much value in the top 3 dogs if you're going to bet on who's going to win the Big Ten. But if you're looking at Illinois, Indiana, there's some good odds there. Maybe Matt Rhule makes his jump. But that's our Big Ten preview. You got staying in the Big Ten program report time. Recapping the program report. This is round 6, I believe, of the program report. We have done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 15 coaches. I could have done the math. I'm sorry. So 15 coaches up to now. Our top head coach is Steve Sarkisian at a score of 9.7. Number 2 head coach is Ryan Day, 9.56. Number 3 is Dan Lanning, 9.48. At the bottom, we have Justin Wilcox at a 3.86. Then we have Dave Aranda, 5.18, and Mike Norvell at a 5.98. So, if this is anyone's first program report, Jason and I are building a database on the fly of how we see each coach entering the 2025 going forward. So we're going to give them a score of 1 to 10 on their coaching performance, on their recruiting vibes, on their program trajectory / hope, and then we'll give them a score of a 10 to 1 on their hot seat. A 10 for a hot seat means that you have the safest seat possible. 1, obviously, self-explanatory. You are probably going to be fired. So the goal of this database in general is by the end of the off season and maybe going into the regular season, we'll have a database of our top head coaches all stacked up, ready to go. Jace, we should have prepared this a little bit more in advance, but if you can type in the numbers, or maybe we can do that afterwards. But starting out with Matt Rhule, coaching performance, what score do you give him on a 1 to 10 scale?
I went with a 6.5. There's not. He went like what 6 and 7, and then 7 and 6, like in back-to-back seasons. They finally made a bowl game, or I think it was 5 and 7, and then last year was 7 and 6. Finally made a bowl game after how many years has it been?
I think like 8 years, something like that.
Yeah. So he's taking the program to a better direction than it has been the last decade. I think for the first time, like Nebraska fans probably feel like they're on the right path, but it still hasn't been anything. I mean, 7 and 6. Yeah, I think like 7 and 6 is. I'm not gonna sit here and act like 7 and 6 is a massive accomplishment that should be crazily celebrated. I mean that should be pretty bare minimum for a program like Nebraska hiring a coach like Matt Rhule. I think he's been above average. I think he's been fun, and I think there's hope there. And my ranking for the hope will reflect that. But in terms of what he has actually done, 5 and 7, 7 and 6, it's improvement. It's better. It's better than a 5.0. It is not making me call home. It's nothing that I'm like, that was a great coaching job, Matt Rhule. You killed it. They haven't really upset many teams. They haven't really had these big game performances where I felt like they were on top of the world. 6.5 for me.
I gave him a 7.7, and all of what you said is true. My reasoning is so he's gone 12 and 13 in 2 years at Nebraska. Not great, but this is the years before he got there. 4 and 8, 3 and 9, 3 and 5 COVID year, 5 and 7, 4 and 8, 4 and 8, 9 and 4 in 2016. Then back then a 6 and 7, 9 and 4, 9 and 4, 10 and 4. So the span of 2015 until this past year, they didn't see a record over 500. Not only did they not see a bowl game, they weren't over 500. And the fact that he was able to at least build that, get that going, that's coaching performance enough for me. Now, does he have the highest tightest leash for me of how quickly will I drop his coaching performance? Probably. But for now, I'm pretty comfortable with where I have him as 7.7. Recruiting vibes, are pretty similar, 7.6, 7.5. He's building the team. And at some point, obviously, Rhule was a big win. At some point, I think to recruit to Nebraska and for Nebraska to achieve the upper echelon of my my Big Ten seating chart, they've got to elevate their recruiting even more. But 7.6, 7.5 is pretty self-explanatory. I don't know if you got anything on his recruiting.
No. 7.6. Everything you said. I'll add. It looks like it's trending in a great direction. They've been getting a little bit more high-profile 4-star recruits, which they haven't been in quite some time. 7.6, 7.5 is where we're at. I think that's a good rating for them, obviously, but room to improve. It is looking like it's on the upward trajectory.
Well, I mean, so for Program Hope, I'll start with mine. I have it at 8.2. What a lot of people in today, 2025 college football don't understand is rebuilding a team you can't microwave. You can bring in talent, sure, but rebuilding a team involves not only culture, but development, bringing in pieces, bringing in bodies for depth. And rebuilding a program like Nebraska that everyone agrees has been a sleeping giant for a while. Not that we know that Matt Rhule is going to get them there, but they have the fan base, a loyal fan base that hasn't gone away despite decades of just being bad or not good enough. They have the brand, they have resources, they have support and alignment within their athletic department and their university to be successful. And they have a coach who's done it at 2 universities in the past of really developing and building out and rebuilding a team. With that said, it's just hard to know it until they're there. And like you said, they've started to recruit some higher level 4-star kids, but it's just a little bit scary for now of this year will tell us a lot about what Nebraska football in 2029 is going to look like. Are they going to continue going on an upward trajectory, like you said, or is this the ceiling for Nebraska football in this generation? So I gave him an 8.2. I'm excited for it. I'm excited to see what they can be. It just depends on, will they actually do it?
Yeah, I'm with you. I was 7.9 for kind of the same exact thoughts. I think there's a future for them. I think Nebraska still has some juice in the tank. I'm not at. I think the reason why I'm not as high and I didn't go over an 8. I I think in today's college football, the like idea of recruiting kids for tradition and getting people to go based on tradition, I think is diminishing a little bit. I think just in today's world, a lot of these younger kids don't quite care as much about tradition or what programs used to be. I think they're more concerned about like what programs can offer them in terms of NIL and life experiences. Whether I agree with that's the way these kids should be looking or not, that's a different conversation. But I think that's where it is. So I think because of that, it's a little bit harder. I think if Nebraska was like, well, look at what we used to be, you could be a part of that regrowth. I think that kid's just looking around like, man, Lincoln, Nebraska has not a lot to do. And, I'd rather be in LA. I think like kids kind of aren't as bought in that way. So that's the only reason why I have them under an 8. But I have them butting up against it because I do think it's a program that you said with a lot of fans. I think some kids still will care about that tradition. I think it's a good coaching staff. I think the Big Ten, I've said it before, there's that gap where you have like those upper echelon teams. A lot of teams fighting for that tier 2 right now. Nebraska being one of them. There's room there to grow into that bigger program. So that's why I keep them under an 8, but they're still high at 7.9.
No, completely fair. Hot seat meter were very similar. You have him at 8.5. I have him at a 9. I don't expect him to even be sniffing the hot seat. Like I said, first coach at Nebraska to lead them to a bowl game in like 8 years. That's obviously they want bigger and better heights. Maybe eventually they'll realize they have a ceiling under him. Maybe they won't. But for now, he's safe in Nebraska. That brings Matt Rhule to a 7.86 in our scoring. That puts him about 9th, I think, in our top coaches, just below Brian Kelly, just above Kalani Sitake. Pretty fair spot for him. Let's go to Kenny Dillingham, the ASU head coach, another coach who's had 2 years at his current school. So the sample size isn't as large as we'd like when we're making these decisions. He's also just 14-12, pretty abysmal year in year one. But I think a lot of people, if you just take that as face value, you don't understand what Kenny was taking over. A lot of people, when Kenny was taking that job, were saying, we're going to get this kid who went to our university and just loves the university, come here, just iron this out. It will be bad, but at least he'll reshape and restructure the culture. He'll make things healthy again in our program after the debacle Herm left them in. And then we'll go get the next coach of our future to win football games. Well, Kenny wasn't listening to any of that. So he came in, had a pretty abysmal year one. Year two, he won the damn Big 12. I gave him an 8.75. It's still not high enough for me to say, all right, this is like you got to go to put him in the 9s in general. But I think part of it is also because there's a question: was last year a fluke? Was last year because ASU just surprised everyone? No one knew about Sam Levitt. No one knew a lot about their team. Going into this year, everyone's going to know about them. So that's the question mark. Kenny, I think, is one of the most brilliant offensive play callers, designers, and game designers in the sport. Him and his relationship with Dan Lanning is really fun to watch. I think, and last year Oregon had an onside kick and off against Ohio State, hit the guy in the chest, came back. Dan and Kenny said that they talk every once in a while during the middle of the week. And I forget who Arizona State did it against, but like 3 weeks later, that's exact same play. Arizona State recovered an onside kick off of some dude's chest. And I think part of that was just the relationship and the network that Kenny has. I gave him an 8.75. I'm very hopeful about them, but what do you think?
Yeah, I have him a 9.0, slightly higher. I think the Big 12 championship last year was amazing. Like, that was a program that was dead. I think nobody expected them to be relevant for the next 5 years. They were under a lot of sanctions. They had run out of talent. Nobody wanted to play there. Nobody wanted to coach there. They were like full of walk-ons and 3 stars. His first year there, he was like middle of the season, like you had mentioned, begging for open tryouts. If you're a 6'6" kid in the Tempe area, come try out for my football team. They did the same thing for kickers last year after they had their kicker kind of miss a few big kicks in the middle of the season. He did an open tryout for that. So I think that shows how little talent that they were working with and how like little bodies, not like literally little, but figuratively, how few talented bodies they had on the roster. And to go win the Big 12 is very impressive. Now, I'm willing to listen, and I do buy in a little bit on the was it a fluke year, because I do think when nobody knows your coaching style, nobody knows your quarterback style. I don't think people were ready for the Cam Scatabo
Nobody even knew
breakout
about Cam
year.
Scatabo. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think plus the Big 12 was just so open. I think nobody was really elite in that conference last year. It does open the door for a quote unquote fluke season to happen. In which case you could definitely make the argument, and I wouldn't resist it at all, that it was a fluke. We'll find out moving forward, but regardless, to do that, it was very impressive. And they had a very, very dominating Big 12 championship win over Iowa State. And you could argue they were an awful recruit or a targeting call away from beating Texas in the playoff last year. Uh, if we're being objective, they should have won that game and they would have moved on. Tough that they didn't. Tough way to go out. But I thought it was the fact that he should have beaten Texas in the playoff last year is pretty wild to think about for a team that was as dead as they were 2 years ago. So 9-0.
They got a recruiting vibes. I think you have him at 6'2". I have a 6'7", 5". They've been pretty average. Do I think that's going to improve as Kenny continues to establish his team? Yes. I think the same thing I said about Matt Rhule. Rebuilding teams, as much as Coach Prime and some other programs want to try to tell you that you can microwave it, you can't. Teams that are dead in the water, like Nebraska was when Rhule took over, or like ASU was when Kenny took over. I'm not even like over exaggerating. ASU was dead in the water. They hired Kenny to be like the nice alumni kid who loves the university and would be willing to go down with the ship just to restructure, resettle things there before they hired the next guy. They know he was smart. They knew he was good, but they were like, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and we'll bring in another guy. But Kenny's at least going to get the culture right. Rebuilding programs isn't overnight, and rebuilding programs the right way isn't overnight, and that's lost in college football amongst the fandom in today's day and age. But it's not been great. He hasn't recruited wonderfully, but part of that is just he needs bodies. He needs to bring guys in. So do I think it goes right into the program hope trajectory. I have him at 8.3 there. You have an 8.5. Part of that is just even if they go back down to earth at 8-4 this year, 7-5, who's the coach at ASU in 10 years? Probably Kenny Dillingham. As long as and part of that is like Kenny Dillingham reminds me so much of the type of coach that you expect NFL teams to be fighting for. You expect not necessarily this year, but in like 2 years, if he continues to have success, or you expect an SEC school to come at him with a big offer, just because he has not only the knowledge of the game, knows how to teach it. Kids love him, but also he's an offensive genius. So he's the type of guy that you expect would be somewhere else in 5 years, 3 years. But at the same time, he's an ASU alum. That's his home, and that's his wife's home. That alone gives you hope enough for ASU going forward. This coming season, they got a couple roadblocks on their schedule. They got TCU, Utah, Texas Tech, Houston, Iowa State, West Virginia, Colorado, Arizona. That's a tough schedule because TCU is your team. Utah, I think, could be a sleeper right now, but a realistic Big 12 champion. competitor, and Texas Tech went all in on 2025. So that could be an 0-3 schedule. I mean, stretch right there, or it could be a 3-0. Regardless of what that is, I have high hopes for ASU in 2, 3, 4 years as Kenny continues to build out the team.
I agree. I'll add on 2 points. One, I think the Big 12 is pretty open at the moment, so any Big 12 team I think could have good hope because there's no big dog in the Big 10. It's hard to, if you're in Nebraska in the Big 10, it's hard to get super hopeful that you're going to climb to the top because that means you have to overthrow Penn State and Ohio State and Oregon and even Michigan in that way, and probably in Illinois and Indiana. But if you're a Big 12 team, you don't have any tier 1 teams right now. That's wide open. In the Big 10, the tier 2 is wide open, but in the Big 12, it's tier 1's open. So I think any team can have hope because that's once you establish yourself as that big program, it really is hard to fall from that. And also, I think Arizona's in a good spot recruiting. Like the Phoenix area produces a decent amount of talent, which is obviously great for ASU. But also, I think you have enough pull that you're still close to home for Southern California kids. You're still close to home for Texas kids. So there's a lot of talent around you that you don't have to like convince kids to go across the country necessarily to go to ASU and compete. You'd be like, hey, it's a chance for you to get away from home, but it's not crazy. It's not like it's big deal for you to travel back and forth with your family. It's not like you're flipping 3 time zones. They're in a good spot recruiting wise, like location, physically. So yeah, 8-5. I have hope. We both believe in Kenny as well, as Farbod mentioned. So I really like what he's doing there, which will lead me into the hot seat meter. I have him as a 10. Farbod, you're at a 9-5. I think for everything you had already said about his relationship with the school, how bought in he is on the school, school's bought in on him. The program's looking like it's much healthier now than it has been probably at any point in our lives. Even when they were at the Jane Daniels, Brandon Ayuk years, the talent on the field was really good, but the program didn't feel healthy. Yeah. Now I think it finally feels like it's on the right track. I think it would take something absolutely wild for him to get fired, whether he sucks for 15 years straight or obviously you don't hope for any scandals or anything like that. But other than those kind of things, I think he's set in stone at ASU.
I could have mine at 10 too. He's set in stone. But that would bring Kenny now to an 8.38 final score in our program report. That would move him above Mike Elko, below Josh Heupel. So he would become, I think, the number 5 coach in our program report, which is fitting. I think as a coach, I think as a guy that kids would run through a brick wall for, people love, future recruiter. He's everything and more. He just hasn't done anything. He's not. I don't want to say done anything, but he hasn't. He's only in year 2. He won the Big 12. Great. Now do it again. Or continue to build that team to make it a regular competitor there. Last one, Jace. We can probably fly through this one, but we also should give it the respect
easiest program report we'll ever do.
So I have to give a background. Jace and I see if we're ranking anyone with the number 10 outside of hot seat, that's Nick Saban level. That is our standard. If like your Tyrone Willingham at Washington, your Chip Kelly at Oregon, Chip Kelly at UCLA, or you're at the very top, Nick Saban at number 10. That's how like the 1, 5, and 10 scores in my brain work.
You said Tyrone Washington, you're talking about 10s. I was like, what are we talking about?
Yeah.
Didn't he go over?
Exactly.
Oh, yes, at the one spot.
He went over, but so Tyrone, not Tyrone Williams. Kirby Smart coaching performance. What you got?
9.9. Farbod's in the same. He's won 2 national championships. They have been probably the most threatening and scary team in college football, championship or not, ever since Saban retired, the last 2 years, and even before Saban, ever since COVID, I guess you could say. They have been the most dominant, threatening, scary, top dog program in the country. He's been to 3 national championships. He's won 2. He's top dog in the SEC. 9.9. Like I said, a Saban run would be 10. So if he can win a couple more, he can put himself in that 10.0 conversation. But 9.9 for now.
I just couldn't give him a 10 because that's Saban.
Mm-hmm.
Bro's got 2 national championships. He's 105 and 19, 9-3. He's established Georgia
105 and 19
as
is crazy.
he's established Georgia as the team in college football. Regardless of what you think of Texas, Ohio State, Oregon, there's big dogs out there, no doubt. But Georgia is the team everyone's still looking at. Georgia is the team that everyone's like, I don't know their quarterback. Gunnar Stockton, sure. I don't know their like overall situations. I just know Kirby's going to have 10 wins at least this year.
Yep.
Like
and I know every
I don't
kid on
care
that
about
roster is a blue chip recruit.
Yeah. Even if depth is down, going into recruiting vibes, you had a 9.7 out of 9.5. They're recruiting with the best of them.
Yep.
there's
Yeah.
there's not much to say. They're going to be top 5 recruiting, get the best guys. They have the resources. They have the support from their collectives and boosters. They have Kirby basically runs the state of Georgia, so he can do whatever he wants, and he's very good at recruiting. Program hope and trajectory. So I gave him a 9.5, which is obviously huge, high, very high. You gave him a 9.5 as well. I want to know what your reasoning is for a 9.5 compared to.
Yeah, the reason why I toned it back from the 9.9 and 9.7, it's gonna obviously I'm gonna talk in a negative light. Again, it's a 9.5, so I think very highly of this program. I do think there's other teams in the SEC getting good, getting better, improving. I think Texas is right there with them at this point. I also just think in general around the country, there's a few programs elevating to that next level. I also think with Kirby Smart, he's now one of the older coaches in college football. There's some young college football coaches that appear to be pretty dominant. So I think I can just see a world where like their reign of dominance isn't as strong as it is currently. So I docked that a little bit. Like I also the one knock on Georgia, they've kind of done all this dominance through defense and offensive line, which is a great way to win football games, and it's probably the easiest way to win football games. But I think like their lack of like sexiness among quarterbacks they put in the NFL and wide receivers, they put a lot of running backs in the NFL, but I feel like they don't tend to produce as well as they do in college. Benson's probably like Nick Chubb that we've had like a true Georgia running back be a stud in the NFL. So I do think they like don't quite have that sexiness at skill positions that can like carry them into these big recruiting cycles year after year. Granted, again, it's still a 9.5. They're still going to get top guys. They're still going to, dominate at that level. But I do see a world where they have plateaued maybe and at plateaued and at elite level, but other teams are going to be
is at the Everest
yes,
level still.
Yes, and people are going to be catching them. So I think the dominance might drop a little.
My expectation in general, and I'm very similar for you in 9.5. It's no flack on Kirby. It's just I don't think this is a conference that Kirby can go. If I give him a 9.9 or a 10, it would mean I think Kirby's going to go win the SEC championship for the next 10 years. I don't think that's going to happen. I think Alabama's going to be there. I think Texas is going to be there. I think Oklahoma, if this year is what we think is going to be, and they use it as a springboard for the future, Oklahoma's going to compete for that. Then they're going to have the years where it's Lane Kiffin's window year. It's there's going to be so many teams in that conference that are going to be there. The other aspect is Kirby last year, he brought it up, but he also brought it up this year. Is like depth is hard in college football in 2025, and then college football, part of it is NIL, part of it is revenue sharing, part of it is the transfer portal, but college football is kind of entering like where the NBA is right now. Not necessarily going to have a ton of parity like the NBA, but in general, you're going to be able to afford your best players, and then the next ring down is going to go to someone else. Whereas the 2021-2022 teams that Georgia had, they had their best players, and then they had another group of best players, and then they had another group of best players. Now they're relying on their third strings, who are elite blue chip prospects. They're just not ready for big time SEC football. 9.5 sounds like we're docking Kirby right now. I just think it's a lot more has to do with the conference he's in and the teams that are also rising, like you said, compared to him. Hot seat meter, he's a alum. He's not going anywhere. The only place, unless we both gave him a 10. Unless Kirby himself chooses to go somewhere else, he's going to be there. That means we have a new number one head coach in college football. Out of the SEC again, Kirby Smart has a 9.75 score in our program report. That he overtakes Sark, who had a 9.7. Man, it's gonna be hard to overtake Kirby. I think Kirby's probably
Yeah.
your set in stone number one guy. So that would bring our top 5 head coaches to Kirby Smart, Steve Sarkisian, Ryan Day, Dan Lanning. Those are our 9.0 or above coaches in college football right now through 16 coaches. And then I want to point out something I say every week. Just because your coach isn't on here doesn't mean we think they're shit. We just haven't gotten to them yet. So if you want us to talk about your team's coach, tweet us, text us, let us know. We'll get into it. But that's the program report. Really developing and building out pretty solidly. Moving on, one quick note. We can spend 2 minutes on this. I mentioned it at the beginning of the show. College basketball, NCAA and EA are releasing college basketball, the video game again. I'm going to be completely honest with you. This predates me as a gamer. So I played NCAA for college football. College basketball predates me. And I saw on Twitter some people saying bring back MVP baseball, the NCAA baseball as well. I don't know if this predates you. I would love your thoughts. I'm excited for it just as a college sports fan, but I would love your thoughts.
This does not predate me. I'm a lifer on the video game grind, I suppose. So when I was younger, so one of my best friends, lifelong best buddies, we would play college basketball all the time, and we would just run a dynasty. It was college basketball 10, if you remember, in the pregame lobby. Player 1's Kevin Durant, player 2's Blake Griffin, the old Texas Oklahoma cover. Great game. It's college basketball. I prefer the simulation version of dynasties. If I'm doing a dynasty, I don't usually play the games myself.
I don't normally
like
hop in games either. Yeah.
And college basketball is the most fun one to sim because the recruiting is a blast in that game. Because I like it because you're not recruiting. You don't have to track 20, 25 recruits the whole time. So college football can be a little time consuming, per year, per week. It can also if you return to the game after not playing for a couple of weeks, you have to kind of okay, where was I at again? This is you can we'll be playing, we won't play for a month, and then we pick it back up, and it's easy to go see your 4 recruits, and okay, yeah, that's right, that's what we're doing. March Madness is obviously electric. I remember when we were kids, when we would get to the actual March Madness, we would get paper and we would write the bracket that was going to happen.
Brackets?
Yes, and then we would create our own brackets based off of the video game, bracket, and then we would track how we did. This is the free time you have as a kid, right? In the summer, doing nothing else. Amazing game. They're super fun. The simulation's awesome. I think basketball, I care less about the quality of college football. I play a lot of more games, and it's I get frustrated at the gameplay at times, and I think obviously it's really hard to get good gameplay in any video game. So this game, I think I'm excited for this sake of I don't really care about the gameplay. So the gameplay, if they're going to do anything, please sacrifice the gameplay for the betterment of the dynasty mode and everything. Let the gameplay come later. But regardless, it's not till 2028, but exciting. It's better than not having one. I've already seen people complain about, oh, why would you announce it this so early? Yada, yada, yada. This is the wait we had for college football. The video game was awesome. A lot of us play it. A lot of us love it. It's better than not having a video game. If you need to cancel Madden to get this thing out a year sooner, I'm down for that. We can let Madden go.
I don't play Madden anymore, especially now that we have NCAA. I haven't bought Madden. I used to buy it every year. I haven't bought Madden in 2 years, 3 years now. Part of that is just the same game, and now I get my football fix from the college football video game. So I don't need Madden. So yeah, absolutely get college basketball out sooner. I hope like I said, it predates me, but I'm excited to jump into it. I play 2K a bunch. Part of me hopes they get 2K's game producers involved for the dynasty franchise modes and my player
2K
mode.
Always had the best versions of that stuff, of the main video games.
But gameplay, like you said, I agree. In terms of You and I are very like idealistic people. Of I want to build a career of this player X or this team Y, and I would love even I would even recommend like I play the college football 25 game all the time. I think the gameplay needs to be excellent in that, but at the same time, if you told me I didn't play a ton of the games just for but the recruiting and the building your dynasty features just got that much better, I'd be like, okay, whatever. I want to build my teams. I want to get into that. That's awesome. One last thing, or one game segment. We're going out of week 1, out of week 0. We graduated onto week 2. Michigan at Oklahoma, 2.5. Oklahoma's favored by 2.5. September 6th at 3:30 Eastern. This is a big game.
Mm-hmm.
It's both teams need it, but neither team needs it to win their conference, obviously, because it's not a conference game. Michigan also, it's funny, they self-designed the self-imposed suspensions for Sharon Moore to be around this game, so Sharon can coach against his alma mater. I'd love to see where you are. I'm rocking. I'm going Boomer. Go straight up Boomer sooner. I think Oklahoma and John Mateer will carry the day in that game. Until I know more about the Michigan quarterback situation, I'll take Oklahoma on the line.
Yeah, I like Oklahoma as well in this at 2.5. It's two programs, as you kind of alluded to, in the same scenario at coming into this season. Two programs, big time powerhouses, traditionally really good. We're used to seeing them at the top, or maybe not we, but college football fans that maybe are a little older than us are used to seeing them. Big brands. But coming into seasons, like last year, both teams had very let down seasons that just not where they wanted to be. Both looking to get on the rise, and both kind of in the scenario where young teams, coaches that are still kind of trying to figure it out, a lot of talent between the two teams, and looking to kind of get back into the thick of college football. Obviously, Michigan more recently, having won that championship 2 years ago, but it does feel like it feels like that Michigan program is an entirely different program than the current day. I mean, it is. They literally lost like every coach other than Sharon Moore, and I mean, now at this point, the entire roster from that.
I'll believe in Michigan. It's the 2.5 line's interesting. That means a neutral site. What, Michigan would be favored by 1? Or
yeah, they usually say 3 points.
Yeah, so that's really interesting to me. If you're telling me that you would favor, I mean, it's maybe just a June 30th line of like, we don't know what each team is going to be. We don't know who Michigan is going to have offensively.
Yeah,
I still think Oklahoma is destined for greatness this year, and they need to win this game as a part of that. That will do it for us and for episode 12 on Flag for Discussion. If you like what you heard, if you like what you saw, if you're on YouTube and you like our backwards hats, please hit subscribe. Follow us on socials, Flag for Discussion, F4 Discussion. Give us a nice little rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. We have 6 ratings on Spotify, and that's a big deal because you have to listen to at least 1 or 2 episodes of a podcast to be able for Spotify to allow you to give ratings out. So please continue doing that. We appreciate everyone who's tuned in. One last point. I might be out next week. We haven't discussed when or how we'll do it, but we're going to talk about that right after this. You might get a solo show from Jace next week. Jace, you're going to have some fun there. That's all I got. Jace, you got anything else?
No, it was a great episode. I'm looking forward to jumping into July, the final month with no college football.
Without college football. How crazy is that? That's awesome. Well, from Jace, from me, this has been Flag for Discussion, episode 12. Peace out.